Today's show is going to be totally different and maybe unexpected. Today, we've invited our husbands to host this entire show. So, take some time to sit and enjoy things from their perspective, but don't worry, we will be back next week. I hope they don't steal this show from us. In all seriousness, enjoy today.
Welcome to Let's Talk About It, a special edition, as several men are on the show today, and we're going to talk about change. The whole concept and topic today is going to be about change, and I want to talk a few minutes about why people don't like to change. Most people have to change, and it's required in different parts of their life, in the church, at work, at home, but people don't like it for the most part. Here's why. First of all, loss of control, loss of whatever they have learned and they've developed. Losing something is a reason that people do not like change. Another aspect is confusion. Whenever there's a change in your life, whenever you're having to learn something new, we're often confused about the process, about the different things that's going on, and confusion is always an aspect of change that people struggle with. Similarly, we got lack of competence. Whenever there's a change in your life, maybe at work, you're having to learn a new software program or learn a new way of doing things, we always feel unprepared and we're not competent in doing that. So lack of competence is another reason people don't like to change. The fourth element that I've studied is change often, we think at least, it requires more work. If there's a change in something that we're doing at the office, at church, in our life, we think I have to do more stuff with it now. I'm adding more irons to the fire. And change doesn't always require more work, but often that's part of the mentality. So we're hesitant for change because of the work. And then the last thing is losing control. Anytime you change, you lose the comfort zone, the place of comfort that you had, and you lose that. So you take change and say, I don't want to go down this road, I don't want to go that direction, because we don't want to lose that control. So these are just 5 elements that we are told of why people don't like change. But today, we're actually going to talk about change and why it's valuable, necessary, and even in the course of history, how we've experienced change. So when we come back, we are just 3 men with bold opinions, always from a biblical perspective. So let's talk about it.
This segment is brought to you by Harry's Construction, whose motto is, "If you can dream it, we can create it." They are the kitchen and bath design experts, so call Harry's Construction for all your remodeling needs.
When it's time for a new roof, Champion Roofing is your best choice. We're a certified award-winning roofing contractor, meaning your roof is done right the first time. Call today.
Champion Roofing, we're the solution.
So as I mentioned, we're going to talk about change today. And this first section is a question of all 3 of us, and we're going to get into some aspects of our culture and change. So, gentlemen, the first thing I want to ask you about is, I remember when I was a kid seeing full-service gas stations. Now, we don't see, I don't know if anywhere in this area at least, full-service gas stations anymore. But why do you think the change went from full-service to self-service? And for someone who's watching and don't know, years ago, full-service gas stations, when you go to a gas station, an attendant would actually come out and fill your gas tank for you. And nowadays, we do it ourselves. It's called self-service. So why do you think that happened? Why was that change from a few decades ago to now where you don't see it at all? Any thoughts? John, what do you think?
Well, I think it comes down to money, employees, convenience stores. Are all, gas stations are attached to convenience stores. The money is not at the gas station, the money is inside. When you go in and buy the hot dogs, candy bars, and sodas.
Sure.
So, yeah.
And I think part of it would be just the volume. certainly over the years from when we were kids to now, there's many, many, many more vehicles on the road, and I can't imagine, that being available for every vehicle now as they pulled in to get gas. And maybe Sheetz had something to do with it too, I don't know.
I mean, if I recall, you paid a little more for full service gas stations. And I remember gas stations where you had one lane that was full service, one lane that was self-service, and if you were willing to pay a little more to be served, you would go. And I think you said, John, you said about money. I believe that a lot of times we're just looking for the cheapest way to accomplish things nowadays. So people don't maybe pay more for the service they get.
I don't know if you've ever traveled in, well, I'm sure you probably have, but New Jersey. I was in New Jersey a couple years ago, and they wouldn't let you pump your gas.
Right.
Yes.
They had somebody that always pumped the gas.
I believe
now,
there's a few,
wasn't first service.
there's a
few
few
states.
states
Right.
that still like that.
And those also, a lot of those gas stations, there's not the convenience store, aspect of it, or it's not as, which is always the argument from the convenience store owner.
Okay, so this is one aspect we've seen from a few decades ago to now. One of the things that we've seen probably in the last decade rise up is self-checkout. When you go to Walmart or even Sheetz or something, what are your thoughts on why, and is it a good thing, is it a bad thing to have self-checkout at different stores nowadays?
I use them. They seem to be a lot more convenient. It seems like that you can check yourself out quicker a lot of times rather than waiting on someone. But there's just something about it that you feel like that's taking away a job for someone or something. So yeah, that's I like it for convenience, but same way with the tolls on the road, and them taking the tolls, they're all gone,
Sure. You want to?
Yeah, I think the self-checkout, I mean, it's fine until it doesn't work properly, or you can't figure out, then you get frustrated.
Yeah.
So.
And I've heard people that are anti self-checkout. I don't work for that store. So someone who, and I understand what they're saying, but the concept is there's a convenience factor that has been introduced.
Yeah, there was a meme floating around that said that, if you've been using our self-checkout here at the store, you need to show up tonight to help unload the trucks when they come in to restock.
Sure. Similar concept here, the convenience factor, buying online. A lot of local retail places are struggling because everybody's buying so much online. What are your thoughts on that change in our culture? What do you think, John?
I hate it. I like to pick it up, look at it, twist it, I hate it. And I want to be able to return it whenever conveniently. My wife uses it all the time. But we get dog food online.
So one of the questions that I was thinking about in this process was, what if whatever aspect of change, what if you look at it as you don't like it, but your spouse uses it and does appreciate it? How do you navigate that in a home where you're anti buying online and she's very pro buying online? How's that?
Carefully. We both have kind of dominant personalities, and we navigate around it quite well. So
Sure.
I'd rather go to Lowe's than to shop online.
There's more days there's almost always something in the mail that we've ordered online. It's almost every day something, but just the convenience of that. It's hard not to love it.
Yeah.
Although I have purchased a few things online that just came and was just junk. It wasn't as advertised.
Sure.
And that's frustrating. But and I'm like John, when you can pick it up and look at the quality and understand a little more what you got, and
Yeah, in our house we do a lot of online shopping. I'm similar. Almost every day I come home from work, there's a package on our door step, and so that's one thing that we've seen, and it unfortunately is a struggle for local businesses because it's a convenience factor pushes everyone to go online. Here again, another convenience, and that's the thing with change. A lot of times it's about convenience. How about working from home? since COVID, we've seen a lot of people go from working in an office environment to working from home. Is that good, bad? What are your thoughts?
That's an individual thing. I work from home a lot. However, it can affect people and it's not as productive.
Sure.
So yeah.
And I've, before everything shut down and so many people started doing that, I would have said it wouldn't work. But obviously that's been proven wrong. I've seen several different studies that says that the productivity and everything is not lacking because of that. My sister works for a rather large company in North Carolina, and they went home, like several hundred employees, and they didn't go back.
Sure.
And to think about that, they don't need that building, that big office space and everything, that because they're just working from their computers and managing all that stuff, and it seems to work out. So certain jobs, I think it works really, really well.
It takes a discipline.
Absolutely. So you can see different perspectives on change in our culture. And when we come back, we're actually going to talk to Dr. Peter Joudry about some things of change in the church. Stay with us.
New Life Worship Center's tax ministry is in their 13th year of serving. This is an organization who will do your taxes, and they only ask for a $30 donation to benefit local charities. They will e-file federal and state returns and complete local returns for you to mail in. They can handle everything from basic family returns to rentals and property returns. Contact New Life Worship Center's tax team on Facebook or by calling them today. Impact Productions, a multi-layer technology company providing on-site, online, and in-studio video services. Contact Impact Productions to capture your story.
Well, welcome back to this special episode of Let's Talk About It. For this segment here, we have a very special guest with us, Dr. Peter Joudry. Now, so far in this episode, we've talked about change. A variety of things have changed in our life and the challenges with it. So this specific segment, we want to talk about change in the church. So why don't we get into this? We'll have a discussion, all of us, but Dr. Peter, especially with you and the different aspects of what you've done in ministry through the years. What are some of the things that you have seen in your time that have changed throughout your many decades to what you see now, good, bad, or indifferent? Let's just talk about some of the things that you've seen change.
Well, we're very wise to talk about this because the bottom line is church has changed dramatically, just like society has changed dramatically. So everything from the way we dress to go to church, to how often we go to church, to our worship styles, to even doctrinal emphasis, the lack of doctrinal emphasis. And so there's just any one of a number of reasons. Even our governance models have changed very, very dramatically. And if you're my age, or my mother who just passed away, if you're her age, the change was a little bit difficult to navigate. And so people need to understand, maybe you've started going to church 6 months ago or a year ago and you're saying, why don't they do this or why are we doing that? Well, you should have been here 50 years ago. And so there's a lot of changes going on in church. And we're not immune to change. The question is, are the changes healthy and positive, and are they helping us grow closer to the Lord Jesus Christ and to one another, or are they just a reflection of the culture? And I say yes.
So, in your experience, Pastor John, what are some changes that you've seen that you feel have been beneficial over the course of your many years? How long have you been pastoring in this area?
I'm in my 30th year.
Okay, so what have you seen in that 30 years in this community change from what you're experiencing now?
Well, almost everything. I don't know how much you know about my history here, but First Church has been around since the late 1800s. And when I came back here in the early 90s, or when I came here in the early 90s, it was a very traditional kind of high church, pipe organ, that kind of thing, responsive reading. And our leadership literally started down a path of change that led to really reaching out to the new generation. Some of the greatest advice I got some years ago was that a pilot can actually turn a 747 around on a dime. So it'll kill everybody on board, but he can do it. Or he can turn it around so gradually that you don't even know you're going a different way. And as far as some of that goes with worship, as Peter said, and other things in church, we just started down a path of just gradually changing to the point where now I don't think anybody that would have been there in the early 90s would recognize the church in that way. But all the things that matter, I've always heard this, that we change methods, but we never change the message. And the message has stayed the same as far as lordship in Christ.
Absolutely. So we talked to you about experiencing change in this culture, in this community. John, you came from, I believe, Hawaii and experienced things all over the world, from church to where you are now. What are some of the things that you've seen change, even culturally, in your experience?
Well, I think when you're talking about clothes and worship, we started in church during that time, and out in Southern California and Hawaii and everything, and so that was no big deal. And I think, but one of the things that I remember as a kid growing up is the whole religious aspect of things, that you needed to be in church. The church needed to be open 6 days a week. You needed to be there 6 days a week, and things like that, or you just weren't arrived. But I look at it more from a generational thing. I think right now that I think changes is good. I really do. I embrace changes. I think the ones that you don't like are the ones that you want to hold on to, that don't want to change. And so I think a lot of it is a good change.
So Dr. Peter, talk a little bit about your doctoral thesis, and then we'll get into some things of the healthy aspects of change.
So in our doctoral cohort, it was all about change, and so we of course referenced Cotter and Cotter's 8 steps of change and all that. And so we talk about how do you change in your context to make the context more healthy, your missional context. I'm kind of reminded of something and I always use this reference, something my father said to his pastor. My father went to be with the Lord a little better than 7 years ago. But probably 7 or 8 years before that, maybe even more, he said to his pastor, "Pastor, if you run the church in a way that makes people with my color hair," my father had white hair, and I don't, by the way, if you run the church in the same way that makes people with my color hair happy, pretty soon all you're going to have is people with my color hair.
Good point.
And so, on the other hand, when my father went to church, my mother used to say he stands there like a wooden Indian because he wouldn't sing the songs. So, and John referenced this earlier. There's this kind of tug and pull. I know we need to change, but as long as you don't change the stuff that I like. And the facts are, we're going to have to change, and the older we get, we're going to have. So what we have to say is to people who are older, like my parents, and I guess like my wife. What we're going to have to say is this is not going to be on TV, is it? So what we're going to have to say is we value you, and we're going to provide a venue for you to experience God in a way that's comfortable for you. We're not going to toss you out. And the second thing we're going to say to our young people is understand that you're not the only ones here.
Sure.
Yeah.
We need our older people. They paved the way for us. At my mother's funeral, the story was told about her going into the church she was dropped off at the door by my brother, a same gentleman every week used to take her by the arm. And it was at the time when they were redoing their lights. I think you have some experience in redoing lights. And they were redoing their lights. And so they were dimming the lights in the auditorium and everything was bright on the platform. And so my mother indulged this for a few weeks without saying anything, but she's kind of frank and candid. And so she finally couldn't take it anymore, and she said to the gentleman who was guiding her into her seat, "You'd think the church would save enough money to pay their power bill so we could turn the lights back on." And so the man who was leading her in was kind of wise and said, "Well, they're doing that because they're creating an ambiance." To which my mother responded, "I thought that's what the Holy Spirit did." You understand that for her, it was almost a theological issue, the change. And so we have to lead, and as Pastor John said, we have to lead people along.
Yeah.
One of the worst things we can do when we go to change something is just to arbitrarily change it without talking about it, why it's important, why it matters, why the people who are younger than me may need it to look a little different than what I'm used to. Those are key components to change. And yet we see sometimes younger people, and of course somebody gave you good advice, and it's pretty good. You've been here for 30 years, and you only look 35, so you must have started. But what's really exciting is when a young person comes into a church and they start to change things. But what is really kind of sometimes a drawback to that is when they don't bring people gently along with them. And of course that creates conflict. And so what I studied is how do churches recover from systemic dysfunction and conflict.
You know, it's interesting. So I've been in the church all my life, and I can see different aspects of change. Some things weren't a big deal to me, but then I found there were times that something that I didn't think would matter to me became a big deal. I'll give you an example. I'll never forget, I was probably in my mid-30s, early 30s, so I wasn't an old guy by any stretch. I remember I went to a church conference, and I went to a youth conference, youth portion of this conference, and the guy on stage leading worship had a hat on. Now, we see that all the time today, but that's quite a few years ago for me. And it was a struggle for me not to focus on that and just truly engage in worship. And I'm not going to get into the whole thing is that wrong, is that right? I realize different places, different aspects of things, but we do see it all the time today. But 25 years ago or 20 years ago, we didn't see that. And that was one thing, like, okay, God, is this a theology issue? Is this a preference issue? And I think sometimes with change, we need to recognize that if it's a theological issue that people are raising, if it's a doctrine issue, yes, we'll talk about that. And if there's some lines that we don't change, there's a message we don't change. But sometimes the methodology in which we communicate and different things that we do change. And hearing some of these stories, I think this is across the board. Everybody has dealt with this in church. And I think, like Pastor John said about turning an airplane, you got to bring people along. And sometimes, whether they're young people or old people, that you got to delicately show them the way, cast vision for change, whatever that change might be. But the church is an interesting place in management. Really, most sectors of the world have a demographic. It's the younger generation, it's millennials, it's older people. Most businesses have a much smaller demographic, where the church, we got to meet the needs of a much larger age range. And so it's always interesting to see how different people do it. So I appreciate all of you, your input. And Dr. Peter, I know you do a lot of things in helping people with conflict and obviously with change. So appreciate you guys being here today. And on this special episode of Let's Talk About It, the men had their say. And next time, the women will be back to talk about it some more.
Hey, y'all, it's Dano. Check this out. Hey, we got some exciting news. Dano on the Counter, Season 2 on Fox 8 at 8 a.m. Make sure you check it out.
Today we've been talking about change, and I'd like to change gears a little bit and talk about a positive aspect of change. And that's how a lot of times change can be seen as a time to mature. So I think it was A.W. Tozier that actually said that we have a whole generation that has grown up that believe that they can be born again and accept Christ, but yet not forsake the world. And most of the time, that's the biggest conflict in organizations and churches today with change. It's generational conflict. And I would just like to encourage you today to look at that a little bit, differently. I remember a long time ago at First Church when we were going through some really significant changes with worship and vision and things like that. We had a little old lady at our church that came from the old school, and she went back as far as anybody else in the church. And I remember describing the worship and the changes in worship one day. She said, you know, if that's what it takes to reach young people for the Lord, then I'm all for it. And you know what? If we keep our hearts and minds focused on that, on bringing real change, maturity, life-changing changes and maturity in the lives of believers, then what else could we do? You know, I kind of look at it this way, and I got a couple things here to show you. You know, if you got a headache, back when I was a kid in the 60s and early 70s, if you went to the store to get something for your headache, you usually looked for something like this. You know, it was a little tin box, and if you're old enough, you'll remember that it was filled with these little chalky aspirins that you had to choke down some way. And but you know, now when you go to the store, what do you get? You usually pick up something like this. You know, this is some fast-acting gel caps. But here's the thing: the medicine in these two headache products are very similar, or maybe even exactly the same. But it's all about the packaging. It's the packaging for today. And you know, I think a lot of times that's what we have to focus on, especially in the church. We should never change the medicine, the gospel, the message of Jesus Christ. But we have to package it different for the generation that we're speaking to. Because let's face it, our greatest goal and desire is to see our children and our grandchildren to know and serve the Lord, just like we have. So, you know, let's just look at changes as a chance to mature. Because you know what? I've learned over the years in ministry that it's the easiest thing in the world to be a critic, to criticize. But you know what? When I look at people that are serving God with the motivation that they want people to know Him, wow, I can see beyond a lot of those little things that can get in the way. You know, there's an old saying in the church, and you've probably heard it. It says that in essentials unity, in non-essentials liberty, but in all things love. You know, the greatest way that God has helped me face change over the years is just by understanding grace better. You know, if you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, then you're my brother, you're my sister, and I want to serve with you. So I don't try to look at all of the external things. I hope beyond anything else that we can affect our culture rather than let our culture affect us. But as we do that, I think we just need to love and care about each other deeply and love and serve God with all of our hearts. Thanks for watching today. Thanks for joining us. And next week, the ladies will be back for more Let's Talk About It.